I knew something was wrong the second I pulled onto my street that Tuesday afternoon and saw the construction crew tearing up my driveway. Not the community driveway. Not the street. My private driveway that led from the road to my detached garage, the one I'd spent $3,000 repaving just 2 years ago. I slammed on my brakes and jumped out of my truck, heart pounding as I watched a massive roller flatten fresh asphalt over what used to be my property. The workers didn't even look up as I approached, too focused on their task to notice the homeowner standing there with his mouth hanging open. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" I shouted over the machinery noise. A guy in a hard hat finally turned around, clipboard in hand. "HOA project, sir. You'll need to move your vehicle." "HOA project? This is my driveway, my private property." I pointed at the survey stakes I'd placed when I bought the house 4 years ago. Or rather, where they used to be. They were gone now, buried under several inches of fresh asphalt. According to our work order, this is community property being brought up to HOA standards. He showed me a document with an official-looking letterhead from the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. I snatched the paper from his hands and scanned it quickly. There it was, my address listed under properties requiring driveway replacement due to code violations and aesthetic concerns. The signature at the bottom belonged to Patricia Hendricks, the HOA president who'd been a thorn in my side since I moved to this Phoenix, Arizona suburb. This is insane. You can't just pave over someone's private driveway without permission. The foreman shrugged. "Look, buddy, I just do what the work order says. You got a problem, take it up with your HOA. We've been hired to do a job, and that's what we're doing. Stop, right now. This is my property, and I'm telling you to stop." He gave me a look that said he'd dealt with angry homeowners before and wasn't particularly concerned. "Can't do that. We've got a contract. Like I said, take it up with your HOA." I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew could help. My attorney, Marcus Lawrence, picked up on the second ring. "Marcus, I need you, now. The HOA just paved over my private driveway without my consent." "They what?" Even through the phone, I could hear the disbelief in his voice. "I'm standing here watching them destroy my property. They claim they have authorization from the HOA, but I never gave anyone permission to touch my driveway. Don't let them leave. Get photos, videos, everything. Get the name of the company, the foreman, copies of any documentation they have. I'll be there in 20 minutes, and I'm filing an emergency lawsuit this afternoon." I did exactly as Marcus instructed. I recorded everything on my phone, took close-ups of the work order, photographed the workers and their equipment. The company name emblazoned on the truck was Desert Paving Solutions. I made sure to get their license plate numbers too. Several of my neighbors had come out to watch the commotion. Tom Reynolds from across the street walked over, shaking his head. "Matthew, what's going on? Is the HOA really tearing up your driveway?" "Apparently. Did you get any notice about this?" "Nothing. But Patricia mentioned something at the last HOA meeting about a beautification project. I didn't pay much attention since my driveway is fine." "When was this meeting?" 3 weeks ago. You weren't there?" I'd been out of town for work, attending a construction conference in Denver. "No, I missed it. But even if there was a vote, they can't just come onto my property and destroy my driveway. It's not HOA property." Tom grimaced. "You know how Patricia gets. She thinks she runs this neighborhood like her personal kingdom." That was putting it mildly. Patricia Hendricks had moved into Meadowbrook Heights 5 years ago and immediately inserted herself into HOA politics. Within a year, she was president, and she'd been making everyone's life miserable ever since. She'd fined people for having the wrong shade of beige on their houses, for leaving garbage cans visible after pickup hours, for parking RVs on their own property. I'd already had 2 run-ins with her over completely ridiculous violations. The first was when she cited me for having a commercial vehicle parked in my driveway. I owned a construction company, and yes, my truck had my company logo on it, but it was also my personal vehicle. She didn't care. The second was when she tried to fine me for having decorative rocks in my front yard that weren't on the approved HOA landscaping list. I'd fought both citations in one, which probably explained why she had it out for me. Marcus pulled up 15 minutes later in his silver Mercedes, briefcase in hand. He was a sharp guy in his early 40s who'd helped me with the business incorporation and several contract disputes over the years. He surveyed the scene with a critical eye, then approached the foreman. "I'm Marcus Lawrence, attorney representing the property owner. I need copies of all documentation authorizing this work." The foreman looked less confident now. "Like I told him, we got a work order from the HOA. That's not sufficient. This is private property. Do you have authorization from the property owner, Matthew Lawson, to perform this work?" The HOA said they had the authority. "The HOA does not own this property. Mr. Lawson does. You're currently engaged in destruction of private property without the owner's consent. That's trespassing and vandalism at minimum. I strongly suggest you cease work immediately." The foreman pulled out his phone and walked away, clearly calling his boss. Marcus turned to me, his expression grim. "This is bad, Matthew, really bad. Not for you, but for them. The HOA has massively overstepped their authority. Even if there were some clause in the CC&Rs about driveway maintenance, they'd still need your consent to perform work on your private property. Can you stop them?" "I'm going to try. We need to file for an emergency injunction, but that might take a few hours. In the meantime, I want you to call the police, file a report for destruction of property." "Will they actually do anything?" "Probably not much today, but we need the documentation. Every piece of evidence helps." I called the Phoenix Police Department non-emergency line and explained the situation. They said they'd send an officer to take a report. While we waited, the foreman came back. "My boss says we need to finish this job. We've got a contract." Marcus stepped forward. "And I'm telling you that if you continue, you and your company will be named as co-defendants in the lawsuit I'm filing this afternoon. Mr. Lawson will seek full damages for the destruction of his property, the cost of restoration, and punitive damages. Your company will also face criminal charges for vandalism. Is that really the position you want to be in?" The foreman's face went pale. He looked at his crew, then back at Marcus. "I need to talk to my boss again." "You do that. In the meantime, your crew stops working. Now." The foreman made another call, this one more heated than the last. I could hear him explaining the situation, getting more agitated as whoever was on the other end apparently insisted he continue. Finally, he hung up and turned to us. "We're going to finish this job. My boss says the contract is valid, and we're protected by it." Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call of his own. "Judge Morrison, it's Marcus Lawrence. I need an emergency hearing. I have a client whose private property is being destroyed as we speak by an HOA that claims authority it doesn't possess." He paused, listening. "Yes, I can be there in 40 minutes with all documentation. Thank you, Your Honor." He ended the call and looked at the foreman. "You've just made a very expensive mistake for your company. I hope your boss knows a good attorney." A Phoenix PD cruiser pulled up, and Officer Janet Miller stepped out. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 30s who took down all the information methodically. She examined the work order, talked to the foreman, took photos, and interviewed me about the situation. "This is really a civil matter," she said after gathering all the information. "But I can issue a citation for trespassing and possible destruction of property. However, since they claim authorization from the HOA, it gets complicated. You'll need to resolve this through the courts." "We're working on that right now," Marcus said, "but we need this documented." "I understand. I'll file a report. You'll get a case number you can reference in your lawsuit." After Officer Miller left, Marcus gathered all his documentation. "I need to get to the courthouse. Keep recording everything. Don't physically interfere with the workers, but make sure you have a complete record of everything they do. I'll call you as soon as I have news." He rushed off, and I spent the next 2 hours watching these people destroy my driveway. The fresh asphalt they were laying was a completely different grade than what I'd had before. It was cheaper, thinner, and already I could see it wasn't being properly compacted. They were doing a rush job, probably trying to finish before any legal action could stop them. By the time they packed up their equipment at 6 o'clock, my driveway was gone. In its place was a substandard replacement that connected to the street at a different angle, eliminating the small landscaped area I'd maintained between the driveway and my property line. They'd even paved over part of my front yard. My phone rang. "Marcus, I filed the lawsuit 30 minutes ago. We're suing the HOA, Patricia Hendricks personally, and Desert Paving Solutions. I'm seeking an emergency injunction, full restoration costs, punitive damages, and attorney fees. Judge Morrison scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. All parties have been notified. That fast? When you can prove ongoing destruction of property, judges take it seriously. I sent process servers to Patricia's house and the paving company's office. They're officially on notice. Don't be surprised if you hear from Patricia tonight. Don't engage with her. Don't respond to any calls or emails from the HOA. Everything goes through me now. Got it. Marcus, thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. That's what I'm here for. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. I went inside my house and poured myself a bourbon. My hands were shaking with anger. 4 years I'd lived in this neighborhood without major issues. And now this. I'd paid a premium for this house specifically because it had a large corner lot with a private driveway separate from the shared community areas. That was one of the selling points. And now, some power-hungry HOA president had destroyed it. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but I recognized the tone immediately. Mr. Lawson, this is Patricia Hendricks. I understand there was some confusion today regarding the community improvement project. I'd like to discuss this with you directly. Please call me at your earliest convenience. I deleted the message without responding. Marcus had been clear about not engaging. 10 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Patricia standing on my porch, dressed in her typical suburban armor of designer athleisure wear and clutching a leather portfolio. I debated not answering, but I also had my phone ready to record any conversation. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Patricia. Matthew, I'm so glad you're home. There seems to be some misunderstanding about today's work. There's no misunderstanding. You ordered a company to destroy my private property without my consent. She smiled in that condescending way that made my blood pressure spike. The HOA has authority over all driveways in the community to maintain aesthetic standards. Several driveways, including yours, were identified as needing replacement. My driveway is not HOA property. It's my private property, clearly within my property lines. You had no right to touch it. According to the CC&Rs, all exterior elements of properties in Meadowbrook Heights fall under HOA jurisdiction. Show me where it says that. Show me the specific clause that gives you the right to destroy private property without owner consent. She flipped open her portfolio and pulled out a document. Section 7, Paragraph 12. The HOA maintains authority over the visual presentation and structural integrity of all exterior elements visible from public streets. That's about approval of changes I make, not authorization for you to make changes without my consent. You're misreading the CC&Rs, probably deliberately. Her smile faded. Mr. Lawson, I don't appreciate your tone. The HOA board voted on this project, and it was approved unanimously. The work is done, and now we need to move forward. You're right about one thing. The work is done, and now we're moving forward. Straight to court. My attorney filed a lawsuit this afternoon. You and the entire HOA board are named as defendants. You'll be served officially, but I'm guessing you already know that since my attorney sent a process server to your house. Her face went red. You're suing the HOA over a driveway? Over the destruction of my private property without consent? Over trespassing, over the HOA, exceeding its authority. Take your pick. This is ridiculous. The HOA will fight this and you'll lose. Plus, you'll be responsible for our legal fees when we win. We'll see about that. Now get off my property. Fine, but you're making a huge mistake. The HOA has resources and we will defend our authority. You mean the resources from all the homeowners' dues you collect? I'm sure they'll be thrilled to know you're spending their money defending your illegal actions. She spun on her heel and marched back to her silver Lexus SUV. I watched her drive away, then closed the door and immediately texted Marcus about the interaction. He called me right back. I told you not to engage. She showed up at my door. I couldn't exactly ignore her. Fair enough. Did you record the conversation? Yes, audio and video. Good. Send it to me. Her admission that the HOA board voted on this could be useful. It shows premeditation and that this wasn't just some contractor error. I sent him the file and tried to relax for the evening, but I was too wound up. I kept looking out my front window at the disaster that used to be my driveway. The asphalt was already showing cracks where it hadn't been properly compacted. The slope was wrong too, directing water toward my garage instead of away from it. In a desert climate like Phoenix, that might not seem like a big deal, but when it did rain, it poured, and now I'd have flooding issues. Around 10 o'clock, I noticed a car parked across the street with someone sitting in it. I watched for a while, and the person didn't move. Were they watching my house? It seemed paranoid to think so, but after today, I wasn't taking chances. I made a note of the license plate and texted Marcus again. The next morning, I arrived at the Maricopa County Superior Court at 8:30, dressed in my best suit. Marcus was already there, briefcase open, organizing documents on a table outside the courtroom. "Morning, Matthew. Ready for this?" "As ready as I'll be. What should I expect?" "Judge Morrison is fair but tough. She doesn't like her time wasted, but she also doesn't like HOAs that abuse their power. I've brought survey documents showing your property lines, photos of the original driveway, the work order from the paving company, everything. We have a solid case." At 9 o'clock sharp, we entered the courtroom. Patricia was there with a lawyer I didn't recognize, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit. 2 other HOA board members sat behind them, both looking nervous. Judge Morrison took the bench, a stern woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes. She looked at both parties and got right to it. "Mr. Lawrence, I've reviewed your emergency petition. Make your case." Marcus stood. "Your Honor, this is a clear-cut situation of an HOA vastly exceeding its authority. My client, Matthew Lawson, owns property at 4782 Desert Willow Drive in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision. Yesterday afternoon, without any notice or consent, contractors hired by the HOA entered his property and destroyed his private driveway, replacing it with inferior materials. We have survey documents clearly showing that the driveway in question is located entirely within Mr. Lawson's property boundaries. We have photographs of the destruction as it happened. We have the work order issued by HOA President Patricia Hendricks. The HOA had no legal authority to perform this work, and yet they did so anyway, causing significant damage to my client's property." The HOA attorney stood. "Your Honor, Bradley Nash representing the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. The HOA was acting within its authority as outlined in the community's CC and RS. All exterior elements of properties within the subdivision fall under HOA purview to maintain community standards." "Mr. Nash," Judge Morrison said, "did the HOA seek the property owner's consent before performing this work?" "The CC and RS grant the HOA authority over exterior elements. Consent isn't required when the HOA is exercising its legitimate powers." "Mr. Lawrence, do the CC and RS explicitly grant the HOA the right to alter or replace private property elements without owner consent?" Marcus pulled out a document. "No, Your Honor. Section 7, paragraph 12, which the HOA is citing, states that property owners must seek HOA approval before making changes to exterior elements. It's an approval clause, not an authorization for the HOA to make unilateral changes. There is no section in the CC and RS that grants the HOA the right to enter private property and perform construction without the owner's consent." Judge Morrison looked at the HOA attorney. "Mr. Nash, do you have any section of the CC and RS that explicitly authorizes this action?" Nash shuffled through his papers. "Your Honor, the HOA has traditionally interpreted Section 7 broadly to maintain community standards. I didn't ask about tradition or interpretation. I asked for explicit authorization. Do you have it?" "Not in those exact terms, Your Honor, but the spirit of the CC and Rs clearly grants the HOA broad authority." "The spirit doesn't matter when we're talking about property rights, Mr. Nash. Either the authority exists in the document or it doesn't. Mr. Lawrence, I'm prepared to grant your emergency injunction, but I need to understand what you're asking for." Marcus stood again. "Your Honor, we're asking for 3 things. First, an immediate order requiring the HOA to restore Mr. Lawson's property to its original condition at their expense, including proper surveying and use of materials matching the original driveway. Second, Temporary restraining order preventing the HOA from taking any further action regarding Mr. Lawson's property without court approval. Third, we're asking that this matter proceed to a full trial where we can seek punitive damages and attorney fees. Your Honor, Nash interjected, requiring the HOA to tear out this driveway and replace it again is an enormous expense. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. Mr. Nash, your client destroyed private property without authorization. Did you think there would be no consequences? The expense of fixing their mistake is not this court's concern. They created this problem. They can pay to fix it. But, Your Honor, the HOA's insurance may not cover this. Then perhaps the HOA board should have considered that before approving this action. Mr. Lawrence, I'm granting your injunction. The HOA is hereby ordered to restore Mr. Lawson's property to its original condition within 30 days, including proper surveying and materials matching the original specifications. The HOA is also ordered to pay for an independent contractor to perform this work, subject to Mr. Lawson's approval. Additionally, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order preventing the HOA from taking any action regarding Mr. Lawson's property without his explicit written consent or further court order. This matter will proceed to trial. I'm setting a trial date for 8 weeks from today. Mr. Nash, I strongly suggest your clients consider settlement. This was a clear violation of property rights, and if this goes to trial, I expect the damages will be substantial. Patricia stood up from her seat. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. The HOA was just trying to maintain community standards. Judge Morrison's eyes went ice cold. Madam, you will sit down and be quiet, or I will hold you in contempt. Your attorney speaks for you in this courtroom. Patricia sat down, her face bright red. Is there anything else, Mr. Lawrence? Yes, Your Honor. We'd also like to add Desert Paving Solutions as a defendant for their role in this destruction. They were warned by both Mr. Lawson and myself that they were trespassing and destroying private property, yet they continued anyway. Granted. Mr. Nash, you'll coordinate with opposing counsel on next steps. This hearing is adjourned. We walked out of the courtroom, and I felt like I could finally breathe. Marcus was grinning. That went even better than I expected. Judge Morrison doesn't mess around. What happens now? Now we see if they're smart enough to settle. They have 30 days to fix your driveway, and trust me, that's going to be expensive. Plus, they know if this goes to trial, they're looking at punitive damages. A smart HOA would cut their losses and offer a settlement. We walked out to the parking lot, and I noticed Patricia arguing with her attorney near their car. She saw us and marched over. This isn't over, Mr. Lawson. The HOA will appeal this decision. Nash hurried over and grabbed her arm. Patricia, stop talking, now. But she jerked away from him. No, he needs to understand that the HOA has rules, and everyone has to follow them. We can't have property owners doing whatever they want. I didn't do anything, I said. You destroyed my property. Your driveway was an eyesore. It didn't match the community aesthetic. It was 2 years old and in perfect condition. Marcus stepped between us. Mrs. Hendricks, any further communication needs to go through your attorney, and I'd suggest you stop talking before you say something that makes your legal position even worse. Nash finally managed to pull Patricia away, apologizing profusely to Marcus as he did. We watched them leave, and Marcus shook his head. She's her own worst enemy. Everything she just said can be used against her in court. She admitted the driveway was in good condition, but she didn't like how it looked. That shows this was purely aesthetic preference, not any legitimate maintenance concern. So what do I do now? Go home, document everything daily. Take photos of how the new asphalt is already failing. I'll draft a list of approved contractors for the restoration work. And Matthew? Start thinking about what you want in a settlement. This is going to cost them a lot of money, and they might prefer to settle rather than go to trial. Over the next week, things got weird. I started receiving violation notices from the HOA for minor infractions. My mailbox was supposedly too close to the street. My house numbers weren't the approved font. My landscaping rocks were the wrong shade. Every single one was petty and clearly retaliatory. Marcus filed a motion with the court documenting the harassment. Judge Morrison issued another order warning the HOA that any further retaliatory actions would result in additional sanctions. But Patricia couldn't help herself. 2 weeks after the court order, I came home to find a citation on my door for having a commercial vehicle parked in my driveway. The same issue we'd fought over before. The same issue I'd won. She was using the new, inferior driveway they'd installed as justification, claiming it was now HOA property and therefore subject to different rules. I called Marcus immediately. She's claiming my driveway is now HOA property because they replaced it. Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Oh, this is perfect. She's essentially admitting that the driveway was private property before, which undermines their entire defense, and she's violating the court order by taking action regarding your property. I'm filing a motion for contempt tomorrow. The contempt hearing was scheduled for the following week. This time, Patricia showed up without her attorney. Apparently, Nash had dropped the HOA as a client, unwilling to continue defending someone who kept making things worse. Judge Morrison was not pleased. Mrs. Hendricks, where is your attorney? I don't need an attorney to defend the HOA's right to enforce our rules. Mrs. Hendricks, you are in violation of my court order. I specifically ordered the HOA to cease taking any action regarding Mr. Lawson's property. Yet you issued another citation just days after that order. The driveway is HOA property now. We paid for it. The driveway is on Mr. Lawson's private property, which you were ordered to restore. Paying to destroy someone's property doesn't give you ownership rights. I find you in contempt of court. The fine is $5,000, payable to the court. Additionally, I'm ordering you to personally pay for the restoration of Mr. Lawson's driveway, since the HOA has failed to comply with my previous order. Patricia's mouth fell open. I can't afford that. You should have thought of that before you violated a court order. You have 30 days to arrange payment, or I'll issue a bench warrant for your arrest. Do you understand? This is insane! I'm just trying to maintain community standards. Mrs. Hendricks, you're making this worse for yourself. One more outburst and I'll double the fine. Do you understand? Patricia finally nodded, looking like she might cry. After the hearing, Marcus and I discussed strategy. She's digging herself deeper. At this point, we could probably get a substantial judgment if we go to trial. But I want to know what you want out of this. Is it about the money, or is it about making sure this doesn't happen again? Both, I said. I want my property restored properly. I want compensation for what they did. And I want to make sure Patricia can't do this to anyone else. Then we push for trial. I'll also recommend to the other homeowners that they petition to remove Patricia from the HOA board. She's creating massive liability for the entire association. Word of the lawsuit had spread through the neighborhood. Several neighbors approached me over the next few days, apologizing for what happened and expressing their own frustrations with Patricia's leadership. Tom Reynolds organized a petition to call a special HOA meeting to vote on removing Patricia as president. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening at the community center. I attended, curious to see how this would play out. The room was packed with at least 60 homeowners, probably the largest turnout for an HOA meeting in years. Tom stood at the front as the acting moderator since Patricia couldn't run a meeting about her own removal. We're here tonight to discuss a vote of no confidence in our current HOA president, Patricia Hendricks. As many of you know, her actions have resulted in a lawsuit against the HOA, a contempt of court citation, and significant financial liability for all of us. The HOA's insurance has declined to cover this incident, which means the costs will come from our reserve fund and possibly a special assessment against all homeowners. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Special assessments were deeply unpopular. Patricia stood up. This is a witch hunt. I've done nothing but try to maintain property values in this community. You destroyed someone's private property, Tom said calmly. That's not maintaining property values. That's creating legal liability. Matthew Lawson's driveway was a problem. It didn't match the aesthetic we're trying to achieve. His driveway was on his private property and in good condition. Another homeowner, Sarah Chen, chimed in. You had no right to touch it, and now all of our dues are going to pay for your mistake. I was protecting property values. No, Tom said. You were on a power trip, and now it's going to cost all of us. We're calling for a vote. All in favor of removing Patricia Hendricks as HOA president, raise your hand." Hands shot up throughout the room. I counted quickly and estimated at least 50 out of the 60 people present voted yes. All opposed? 5 hands went up, including Patricia's. The motion passes. "Patricia, you're removed as HOA president effective immediately. We'll need your files, passwords, and all HOA materials within 48 hours. Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed out, but not before turning to glare at me. "This is all your fault." "No," I said quietly. "This is all your fault." The HOA elected Tom as the interim president, and his first act was to reach out to Marcus about settlement negotiations. They met the following week, and Tom came with a realistic assessment of the situation. "Look," Tom said during the meeting, which I attended, "the HOA screwed up. Patricia screwed up. We all know it. We want to make this right without bankrupting the association. What would it take to settle this?" Marcus laid out our demands. Full restoration of the original driveway by a contractor of Mr. Lawson's choosing, using materials matching the original specifications. Payment of all attorney fees, which currently total $18,000, $50,000 in damages for the trespass, destruction of property, and emotional distress, and a formal written apology from the HOA, acknowledging that Mr. Lawson's driveway was private property and the HOA had no authority to perform the work. Tom winced at the numbers but nodded. "I need to take this to the board, but I think we can make this work. The reserve fund can cover it without a special assessment if we're careful. Give me a week." True to his word, Tom called back 6 days later. The HOA board had voted unanimously to accept the settlement terms. Within 2 weeks, I had a check for $68,000 covering damages and attorney fees, a formal apology letter signed by all board members, and a crew tearing out the inferior asphalt and properly restoring my driveway. This time, I hired the contractor myself, a company called Precision Paving that had excellent reviews and did meticulous work. They surveyed the property lines, excavated properly, used the correct base materials, and laid high-quality asphalt that matched my original driveway. They even restored the landscaped area that had been paved over, replanting the desert plants that had been destroyed. The whole process took 3 weeks, and when it was done, my driveway looked better than it had before. The contractor also added proper drainage to prevent the water pooling issues the HOA's crew had created. But the story didn't end there. Patricia wasn't done causing trouble. A month after the settlement, I received a letter from an attorney representing Patricia Hendricks personally. She was suing me for defamation, claiming I'd damaged her reputation in the community. The lawsuit alleged that I'd made false statements about her at the HOA meeting and to neighbors, causing her emotional distress and harm to her standing in the community. Marcus read the lawsuit and laughed. "This is frivolous. Everything you said was true and documented. She's just lashing out because she lost. We'll file a motion to dismiss, and I'll probably countersue for malicious prosecution." The motion to dismiss hearing was brief. Patricia's attorney, a different lawyer than Nash, tried to argue that I'd engaged in a campaign to destroy Patricia's reputation. Judge Morrison, who was handling this case too, shut it down quickly. "Counsel, your client destroyed Mr. Lawson's property, was found in contempt of court, and was removed from her HOA position by a vote of her neighbors. Mr. Lawson didn't damage her reputation. She did that herself. This lawsuit is frivolous and appears to be retaliatory. I'm dismissing it with prejudice and awarding attorney fees to Mr. Lawson. Additionally, I'm sanctioning Mrs. Hendricks $5,000 for filing a frivolous lawsuit. If she files any further legal action against Mr. Lawson without merit, I'll consider it harassment and take stronger measures." Patricia's attorney looked embarrassed. "Your Honor, my client was acting on what she believed was legitimate harm." "Your client was acting on spite. Tell her to stop. This harassment ends now." After that hearing, Marcus and I walked to a nearby coffee shop. "That should be the end of it," he said. "She spent probably $30,000 in legal fees between the HOA lawsuit and this defamation case. She lost her position, her reputation, and a lot of money. Most people would cut their losses. But you don't think she will." "I think Patricia's the type who can't let things go. But at least now there are consequences if she keeps coming after you." Marcus was right to be cautious. 2 weeks later, I noticed someone had spray-painted obscenities on my newly restored driveway. Bright red paint spelled out various insults across the fresh asphalt. I immediately called the police and filed a report, then had my security cameras checked. I'd installed them after the original incident, and they'd captured everything. The footage clearly showed Patricia's silver Lexus SUV pulling up at 2 in the morning. A figure matching her build got out, spray-painted my driveway, and drove away. The license plate was clearly visible. Officer Miller came to take the report and watch the footage. "That's pretty clear evidence. I'll get a warrant for her arrest." Arrest? For vandalism? For criminal damage to property and possibly stalking, given the pattern of behavior. She's been told multiple times by a judge to leave you alone, and she's not listening. That's going to escalate the charges. 2 days later, Patricia was arrested at her home. The local news picked up the story because it was unusual to see someone arrested for HOA-related disputes. The headline read, "Former HOA president arrested for vandalizing homeowners' property in ongoing dispute." The news coverage brought even more attention to the case. A reporter from the Arizona Republic reached out for an interview. After consulting with Marcus, I agreed to talk to them. The reporter, David Gutierrez, met me at my house. He took photos of my driveway, now stained with red paint that required professional removal, and interviewed me about the whole ordeal. "What do you think drove Patricia Hendricks to these extremes?" he asked. "Honestly, I think she couldn't stand that someone challenged her authority. She saw the HOA presidency as giving her power over everyone in the neighborhood, and when someone pushed back, she couldn't handle it." "What about the other homeowners? What do they think?" "Most of them are relieved she's gone. She made everyone's life harder with petty violations and power trips. This situation with my driveway was just the most extreme example." The article ran 3 days later with the headline, "HOA Horror Story: How One Phoenix Homeowner Fought Back Against Property Destruction." It detailed the entire saga, from the original paving incident through Patricia's arrest. The comment section exploded with people sharing their own HOA nightmare stories. The publicity had an unexpected effect. The Meadowbrook Heights HOA was contacted by several local news stations for comment. Tom, as the new president, gave a statement acknowledging the mistakes made and emphasizing that the association was under new leadership committed to respecting homeowners' rights. Patricia's criminal case proceeded through the courts. She was charged with criminal damage to property, which in Arizona is a felony when the damage exceeds $10,000. My driveway had just been restored at significant cost, and the paint damage meant it would need to be resurfaced again. The total came to $12,000. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was unsympathetic given Patricia's pattern of behavior and the fact that she'd violated multiple court orders. The case went to trial. I testified about the entire sequence of events, from the original destruction of my driveway through the vandalism. The security footage was played for the jury, clearly showing Patricia's vehicle and someone matching her description committing the vandalism. Patricia took the stand in her own defense, which her attorney clearly advised against. She claimed she was being persecuted for trying to maintain community standards. She insisted that I had made her life impossible and she'd had a moment of weakness when she painted my driveway. The prosecutor asked her about the court orders she'd violated. "Mrs. Hendricks, Judge Morrison specifically ordered you multiple times to cease any contact or action regarding Mr. Lawson's property. Did you understand those orders?" "Yes, but I was upset. He destroyed my reputation." "You destroyed your own reputation by breaking the law. Did you think you were above the court's orders?" "No, I just thought you thought the rules didn't apply to you. Isn't that the same attitude that led you to destroy Mr. Lawson's driveway in the first place?" Patricia's attorney objected, but the damage was done. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Judge Morrison handled the sentencing. She'd clearly followed the case and was not inclined toward leniency. Barr. "Mrs. Hendricks, you've shown a pattern of believing you're above the law. You destroyed someone's property without authority. You violated multiple court orders. You committed vandalism in retaliation for lawful actions taken against you. This court has given you numerous chances to change your behavior, and you've ignored every warning. I sentence you to 18 months in prison, suspended to 6 months with 18 months probation. You'll also pay full restitution for all damages, including the driveway restoration, which totals $62,000 when including all costs. Additionally, you're prohibited from serving in any HOA leadership position for 10 years. Do you understand the sentence? Patricia was crying. I understand. I hope you do, because if you violate the terms of your probation, you'll serve the full 18 months. Use this time to reflect on why you're in this position. Patricia was led away to begin her sentence. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that this ordeal was finally over, but sadness that it had come to this. All of this could have been avoided if she'd just respected basic property rights. Outside the courthouse, Marcus and I talked about the outcome. It's rare to see someone actually go to jail over an HOA dispute, he said. But this was never really about the HOA. This was about someone who thought they were above the law and kept proving it until they faced consequences. Do you think she'll actually learn from this? Honestly, probably not, but at least she can't hurt anyone else for a while. The story continued to generate attention. Several HOA reform groups reached out, asking if I'd speak at events about homeowners' rights. I did a few talks emphasizing the importance of understanding your property rights and not being afraid to stand up to overreaching HOAs. The Meadowbrook Heights HOA underwent significant changes under Tom's leadership. They revised the CC and RS to clearly define the limits of HOA authority, created an appeals process for violations, and implemented term limits for board positions to prevent any one person from accumulating too much power. My driveway was restored again, this time at Patricia's expense per the restitution order. It took several months for the paint damage to be properly remediated, but eventually, my property was back to the condition it should have been. Tom approached me at a neighborhood barbecue about 6 months after everything was resolved. Matthew, I want to apologize on behalf of the HOA. What happened to you should never have occurred. We've implemented new policies to make sure it never happens again. I appreciate that, Tom. How are things going with the new board? Much better. We're focused on actual community maintenance, not petty violations. Property values are up and people actually enjoy living here again. It turns out that when you treat homeowners with respect, they're more willing to work together. Imagine that, I said with a smile. Life slowly returned to normal. I continued running my construction company, worked on my house, and enjoyed living in a neighborhood that was finally functional. The lawsuit settlement money went into my savings, earmarked for future home improvements. The only lingering reminder was the occasional news story referencing the case. It had become something of a cautionary tale in HOA circles, an example of what happens when leaders abuse their authority. Several states were considering legislation to reform HOA powers, using cases like mine as evidence of the need for change. Patricia was released from prison after serving her 6-month sentence. I heard through neighborhood gossip that she'd moved to a different part of Phoenix and was keeping a low profile. She still had years of probation ahead and a significant restitution debt to pay off. One afternoon, about a year after everything concluded, I was working in my garage when someone knocked on the door. I opened it to find a woman I didn't recognize, probably in her early 30s. Mr. Lawson? I'm Nicole Davis. I live in a subdivision in Scottsdale, and I'm having problems with my HOA. They're trying to force me to remove a wheelchair ramp I built for my disabled son, claiming it doesn't meet their aesthetic standards. I read about your case, and I was wondering if you could recommend your attorney. I gave her Marcus's contact information and wished her luck. As she left, I realized that this had become part of my legacy. People fighting against unreasonable HOAs saw my case as proof that you could stand up and win. Marcus called me a few days later. Nicole Davis reached out. I'm taking her case. It's another clear overreach by an HOA. These associations really need to learn where their authority ends. Think she'll win? Absolutely. The Fair Housing Act protects reasonable accommodations for disabilities. The HOA doesn't have a leg to stand on, but she'll win faster and easier because your case established good precedent in Arizona courts. The phone calls and emails continued sporadically over the following years. Homeowners from across the country reached out, sharing their HOA horror stories and asking for advice. I couldn't help everyone, but I tried to point them toward resources and attorneys who specialized in HOA disputes. My own neighborhood continued to thrive under responsible leadership. The HOA focused on actual community needs like street maintenance and common area upkeep, not on harassing homeowners over minor aesthetic preferences. It turned out that an HOA could actually be a positive force when run by reasonable people. 5 years after the original incident, I was sitting on my porch enjoying a Saturday morning coffee when Tom walked over. He'd remained HOA president largely because he was good at the job and no one wanted to replace him. "Morning, Matthew. Your driveway's looking good." I laughed. "It better be, given everything it took to get it this way." "I know this is ancient history now, but I wanted to thank you for fighting back when you did. If you just rolled over and accepted what Patricia did, she would have kept getting worse. Who knows what she would have done next? I couldn't just let her destroy my property and get away with it. A lot of people would have. They would have been intimidated by the HOA, worried about the cost of fighting back. But you stood up, and it changed everything. This neighborhood is better because you didn't back down. I had a good attorney and a strong case. That made the difference. You had more than that. You had the courage to fight when it would have been easier to give in. That matters." After Tom left, I thought about his words. The whole ordeal had been exhausting, expensive, and stressful. But it had also been necessary. Property rights matter. The rule of law matters. And when someone abuses their authority, whether they're an HOA president or anyone else, they need to face consequences. My driveway, that simple stretch of asphalt leading from the street to my garage, had become the center of a legal battle that changed HOA practices across Arizona and beyond. It was a reminder that sometimes the most important fights are over things that seem mundane on the surface but represent fundamental rights underneath. I finished my coffee and headed inside. I had plans to build a deck in my backyard, properly permitted and approved through the appropriate channels. The HOA wouldn't have any say in it since it was in my private backyard, but I'd submit the plans anyway just to keep everyone informed. That was the difference between being a responsible homeowner and being Patricia Hendricks. The deck project went smoothly. No drama, no conflict, just a straightforward home improvement project. It was remarkable how easy things could be when everyone involved acted reasonably and respected each other's rights. Years passed, and the story faded from immediate memory, though it remained a significant case study in property law circles. I eventually sold the house and moved to a property outside the HOA jurisdiction entirely, a few acres in the desert where no one could tell me what to do with my driveway. The buyer of my old house was a young couple who loved the neighborhood's new culture of reasonable governance. They'd heard about the infamous driveway incident and were amused to be buying the house from that case. "We specifically looked for a home in an HOA with sensible leadership," the husband told me during the closing. "Your situation taught us to do our research before buying. We interviewed the board members, read the meeting minutes, checked for pending litigation. This HOA is one of the best run in Phoenix now." That's good to hear. It was a nightmare for a while, but Tom and the new board really turned things around. "We heard Patricia Hendricks finished her probation last year." "Yeah, I heard that too. I hope she learned something from the experience." As I drove away from that house for the last time, I looked in the rearview mirror at the driveway that had caused so much trouble. It looked perfect, just a normal driveway that happened to be at the center of an extraordinary legal battle. The lesson from all of this wasn't complicated. Respect people's rights, follow the law, and don't abuse whatever authority you might have. Patricia Hendricks forgot those simple principles, and it cost her everything. Meanwhile, the neighborhood flourished once they remembered that an HOA exists to serve the community, not to control it. I never heard from Patricia again. Sometimes I wondered if she ever understood why everything fell apart, or if she still believed she was the victim. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I had acres of desert, no HOA, and a driveway I could do whatever I wanted with, and that was exactly how it should be.